So today, let's talk about RSL in terms of the moving forward series. And I know whenever people talk about RSL this season, everybody will remember what happened off the field with them and the whole Dilloy Hansen incident. And that some people will say that that might be the reason why it kind of caused a distraction in terms of this RSL team, and therefore that's why they kind of had such a bad season. But what I'm going to talk about here in the moving forward series for RSL is the fact that maybe that is not the reason why they actually had a bad season, and there's actually more to it why they kind of had a bad season. And in some way, I think they pretty much had a season that is kind of similar to FC Cincinnati and the Houston Dynamo, and I'll talk about that when I get to the what went wrong part, where I of course kind of explain why do I say that they kind of had a similar season to what FC Cincinnati and the Houston Dynamo down the stretch. Now, first of all, in terms of this season, they finished with a record of 5, 7, and 10, and they finished with 22 points. They scored 25 goals this season and allowed 35 goals with a goal differential of -10. Both of them are kind of right around the mid-range in terms of the most goals or the least goals that score or allowed this season, and they finished 11th in the Western Conference. Now, for the MVP, this is going to be a little bit of a surprising MVP that I decided to award, because you would think I could easily just award the MVP to Damar Krylak because he is a top goal scorer, or you can even say maybe Michael Chan can be in that list because of the fact that he was the top assist leader. But I'm actually going to go with a goalkeeper, and I'm actually going to go with Andrew Putna. And I know Putna didn't start almost every single game for this team, so you're thinking, why is he the MVP if he didn't even start like every single game with this team? Well, I think from what he did this season, he kind of almost replicate of what Nick Rimando did when he was still with this RSL team. I mean, there was times where he was definitely making some incredible save and really just stealing resort for RSL during this season, and that I really think that RSL might have just found a replacement for Nick Rimando in Andrew Putna, and I hope that they, of course, will continue to keep him because he has just had an incredible season. And he's also one of those goalkeeper that I think is being very underrated with the way that, I know a lot of people, when they talk about good goalkeeper, they obviously mention Andre Blake and Matt Turner, or maybe some would say Dane Sinclair also belongs to that list, but not a lot of people will mention Andrew Putna of how decent he is this season, and that there was definitely times where he's definitely stole some resort for RSL this year. Now, the most disappointing player for RSL, there was definitely some good candidate to be the most disappointing player, but I'm going to have to go with Albert Rusnak, and I know he had to deal with some injury issue during this season, but yeah, this just have not been a great season whatsoever for Albert Rusnak. Only 3 goals that score and 2 assists, by far way below the mark that he used to be, and this is supposed to be the guy that is supposed to be their star player alongside with Damar Krylak in that attack in front, and he just have not shown that this season, and it's kind of also one of the reasons why this team really struggle on the attacking end, especially near the latter part of this season. Now, in terms of the top goal scorer, as I said, Damar Krylak finished as the top goal scorer with 8 goals, followed by Justin Merrim and Albert Rusnak tied with 3 goals. Corey Bear and Douglas Martinez finished tied at 4th place with 2 goals to their name. Top assist leader, you got Michael Chan with 6 assists, Corey Bear with 4, Justin Merrim with 3, Albert Rusnak with 2, and Pablo Ruiz rounds off the top 5 in terms of the assist leader with 1 assist for RSL this season. Now, what went right with this team? Well, they made it to the round of 16 of the MLS's back tournament, which is kind of a good achievement. I mean, for all these teams that is having a tough season, it's really tough to try to put what actually went right. So I guess that's kind of one of the things that went right, as they were able to get into the next round, and that they were also in a very, very tough group in that one where I said that Group D was really the group of death, with 3 of the 4 teams, or all 4 of these teams in that group, to have not suffered a loss coming into the MLS's back tournament group stage. And the second thing, and this is probably the most important thing that I want to mention, of kind of just my argument of why I think the whole distraction that was off the field and the whole Deloy Hansen incident is not the reason why RSL was struggling. Because even during crisis and even during that time around the end of August when that whole situation happened, the team was still playing with some resiliency, and the team was still getting resort and still getting win. I remember right after that incident happened, the first game that they of course play after that incident happened, I believe they won 4-1 against the Colorado Rapids in that one. And then the very next one where they play against the Timbers, and yes, they did give up 4 goals in that game, but they also scored 4 goals in that game, and they were showing that never say die mentality in that game to basically refuse to drop all 3 points and get probably one of the most gutsiest 1 point they've seen a team fight for throughout this entire season. So yeah, even during crisis, the team definitely did not look like they were broken whatsoever, and that this team was still in the position of the playoffs despite the fact that this crisis was really clouding this team. Now, what really is the reason why this team kind of struggle? Remember how I said that their struggle is a combination of what the Dynamo and FC Cincinnati had down the season? Well, just like the Dynamo, they find wins very hard to come by down the stretch. As for the final 12 games of the season, and pretty much for their second half of the season, they only won 2 games, and that is something that is just not gonna cut it if you want to make it to the playoffs. If you're going to go through that cold of a stretch of only getting 2 wins in those 12 games. The other reason, as I mentioned about FC Cincinnati as another reason that was coming, that RSL kind of had similar to their season, is that the goals were drying up. Like the goals were drying up with the way that in the last 9 games they only scored 6 goals in all of those 9 games, and I think there was 4 times in their last 9 games that they got shut out in a match. So yeah, goals have definitely dried up on this team, and while this team for the most part in the first half of the season definitely have a decent attacking end, the second half of the season was definitely a total story, and they just find it hard in terms of scoring goals in the second half of the season, which also puts a big part of why they only won so few games in the second half of the season. And then the third reason is obviously the road form. I mean, the road form for RSL is one of the thing that's been a problem for them for the past couple of years, and it's happened again this season, where they only won 1 game this season on the road, and that only win was that 4-1 victory that they had against the Rapids on the road. But even that, I'm going to put that as a huge asterisk, because it feels like every time when RSL are able to pull off a win on the road, it's always against Colorado. Like, there's no, for whatever reason, there's, as much as they struggle on the road, they always find a way to somehow go on the road and do very well against the Rapids. And I just wonder, why can't they do that against the other team? I mean, I understand it is a rivalry and maybe players are more up to, but what about the other games? I mean, I feel like, you know, they could play like what they did with the Rapids year after year whenever they go on the road. This team would definitely have a decent road record, but yet that just has not been the case, and that the road form is a huge problem with this team, and hence that's whenever I always say, whenever a team has problem on the road and aren't able to win games, you're putting a lot of pressure on your home form. And if you started to drop points, as we saw this season, where RSL multiple times have dropped points at Rio Tinto Stadium, that could be a huge issue with the team, and hence this is when things kind of unravel if you started to drop points at home, knowing that you're already struggling on the road. Now, moving forward for this RSL team, obviously the big talking point this offseason is going to be who's the new owner of RSL. Obviously, Deloy Hansen is no longer going to be part of this team after he agreed to sell this team, but now there is still a lot of question of who exactly is going to be the new owner for this team. And once this new owner comes to this RSL team, is there going to be a change of culture? Is there going to be a time where they might shift away a little bit from their homegrown product? This is one of those teams that heavily rely on their homegrown players in terms of putting them a decent squad. And throughout these last couple of years, it hasn't really worked out as well as, let's say, what FC Dallas and the Red Bulls have done with some of their homegrown player, or even the Philadelphia Union with some of their homegrown product into their team. So is there going to be a change of culture in terms of that? The second thing that's moving forward is Freddy Kroos actually going to be the right man for this team? I mean, at times this season, I thought Freddy Kroos is actually the right man this team, and he's been doing a great job at RSL. But then there's some times where I just question some of the moves that he made, whether it's the formation that he used, or the lineup that he used, or most importantly, the substitution that he used. Like, sometimes the substitution are either made way too late, or it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So you wonder, is he actually going to be the right man with this team? And I doubt that maybe RSL, the reason why he had, despite this bad season and and that he hasn't really been in the hot seat, is because he's been part of this team for a very long time. And when you have this kind of loyalty toward a team, usually they are reluctant to, of course, decide to fire you. Heck, I mean, just look at DC United, of how they took 10 years to fire Ben Olsen, and that people's been crying for him to be fired since probably a couple of years back, but it only took till this time when they decided to pull the trigger. So I doubt that Freddy Kroos might not be in danger of losing his job, but there's definitely a question of whether or not if he's actually the right man for this team, and whether he can guide this team back into playoff contention next season. And then the final thing moving forward for them is kind of something similar to what I said earlier. Is there kind of a culture change where the new ownership will start to spend a little bit more money and bring in some more talented on this team? I mean, the talent gap between this team and some of the more talented squad is definitely a huge gap. But one of the things that make RSL so good for the past couple of years and be regular playoff contender is that their homegrown has come through, and that they always have this kind of team spirit and just this togetherness to kind of grind their way into a playoff position. But what we've seen in these last couple of years, that kind of spirit is started, I wouldn't say it has gone away, but it started to doesn't really matter anymore, because the league is moving toward a period where you just have to have at least a couple of talented players on your team if you're going to be successful. You can't just really rely on fully your homegrown in order to, of course, be a decent team. So yeah, we shall see whether or not if this is going to be a case where they are going to be spending some money. And that I didn't even mention the fact that their last couple of designated players that they signed has definitely not been very successful whatsoever. So they might think about potentially rethinking that. And again, I think depending on what this new ownership is going to be with this team, it could be very interesting to see what the direction this team is going to go through with this new ownership. But yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it for this moving forward series for RSL. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this? If you're an RSL fan, what do you think went right for your team? What went wrong? And most importantly, moving forward in the future, what do you think this team is going to look like next season? But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.